Studios production.
Welcome to Profiles of the Creators. In our show, we take a look at and talk to those creatives that dance to a beat of a different drum. As we profile some of the artists, musicians, singers, directors, writers, producers, actors, and other talented creatives that are driven to create art and media in multiple forms. We hope you, our listener, are also inspired to dream and create. Here's your host, Michael Razo.
Welcome to our first official episode of Profiles of the Creators. I'd like to thank you for tuning in today, and I hope you enjoy and gain something from our in-depth discussion with creators of many different mediums from across various art forms and creative fields. First, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Michael Razo. I've always enjoyed the creative arts. As a young child, I was surrounded by great visual artists, namely my mother, but also others who had a natural gift and talent for art. Unfortunately, I quickly found myself to be a pretty terrible artist. I could never get past basic concepts of perspective and dimension and color. It was pretty terrible. But luckily, I soon discovered a love for music. As the old adage says, practice makes perfect, and I found myself learning as much as possible about my first instrument of choice, the saxophone. Fast forward to the last couple years, I've had experience as a musician, particularly in jazz and Latin genres, worked as a film producer and writer and music composer, and more recently, I dusted off my frustrated visual artist soul as an amateur puppet designer and puppeteer. I've always found myself enthralled with creative people and creative work, even though I've always had one foot stuck in the corporate world. I've always looked up to people that thrust their entire heart, soul, and passion into creative endeavors, and this is sort of where we begin with Profiles of the Creators, as we talk to some of the creatives as they navigate a world that sometimes overlooks and undervalues the creative mind. So where did they start? Who influenced them? What inspires their creative spirit? How do they approach creative work, and how do they inspire us to do the same? I could not think of a better guest for my first episode. He's a musician and creator. He is the trombone player for Houston, Texas's own Gulf Coast soul band supergroup, The Sufferers, and he also happens to be my little cousin and honorary little bro. His name is Michael Razo. In addition to his work with The Sufferers, he is also an avid collector of vinyl, he DJs, and is a music lover of many genres. He also hosts his own podcast, Bonetown, a podcast about nothing but trombone. Welcome to Profiles of the Creators, Razo.
What's up? What's up?
Hey, all right. So first off, I can't call you Razo. It's weird.
Dude, you don't have to call me Razo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I call you Razo, like, you know, we have mutual musician friends, and when I refer to you, it's like sometimes I have to jog people's memory, and then I say Michael, and they're like, who's that? And I say Razo, and they're, oh, Razo, oh, yeah.
It, like, the only people that call me Michael is mostly my family. So
Yeah.
I'm, like, that's cool. I don't mind. I mean, I don't really care what anybody calls me. Everybody just likes calling me Razo. And
Yeah.
also, in elementary, I grew up with like 5 different Michaels, so everybody was like called by last name.
Yeah, I know. I
And
was John for a lot of years, so that's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's why we called you Matt.
Right, exactly. So, well, that's a good segue, because a lot of people know you through your work with The Sufferers, being featured everywhere from Billboard, Rolling Stone Magazine, Texas Monthly, the sort of meteoric... God, why did I write that word and I can't even say it? This sort of rise of the small band from Texas that ended up being one of the last musical groups to play on Late Show with David Letterman, before doing the TV circuit and touring the country and eventually around the world. But before we get there, I want to kind of dwell back into your past, into the backstory, and how you started and stay there for a while, because I was sort of there. And I think our creative stories always begin at the beginning, as it does with most creatives. So take us back to the beginning. Non-copyrighted segue song. Yeah.
Well, I didn't. Let's see. Playing music was. My parents always listened to music, so listening to music in the house was always like a big thing. And then as far as family musicians, you were like a big brother to me. Well, you are like a big brother.
Yeah.
And so, like, growing up, you were always doing all this stuff because, like, we're 8 years apart?
Yeah, 8 years, exactly.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
like, I just would see you playing saxophone. I was like, man, I want to play an instrument. That's cool. and and but I didn't want to play sax. I didn't know what I wanted to play. I just know I wanted to play something. And then in elementary, they had like a program to like start early program. And unfortunately, I didn't make it. But I did get. They had a program in 5th grade, a mariachi program, and one of my best friends, Michael Razo, he played trumpet.
Oh, that's
He was in the early start program. So when the mariachi thing came around, the mariachi band, they wanted us to try an instrument that we felt comfortable playing with to try out. And he goes, dude, I'll teach you how to buzz on a mouthpiece. And I was like, okay. Like literally while we're sitting at the table taking turns to go try instruments.
Yeah.
So like I learned how to do it like right then and there. And so when I went up there to try, I just buzzed in the thing. They're like, oh yeah. Okay, go sit down. And then they accepted me into the program because they're like, oh, he knows what he's doing, kind of thing.
That was your trial. You were anointed at that moment.
Yeah, and well, the guy ended up stopped showing up because it was an after-school program, and I rented a trumpet, and I was really upset because, well, my parents were upset because they paid for the rental, and I didn't do anything. All I learned was a B-flat scale on a trumpet. And then when it came to intermediate, we got to look at all the instruments and stuff, and I was going to do trumpet just because I already knew how to buzz on it.
Yeah.
And but then they went when they brought us into class in 6th grade. They were going. They're bringing each child in and asking us what we wanted to play. But they went alphabetically by last name, and so I'm Razo. So I was like towards the end. Yeah. And so so when they asked me what I wanted to play, Mr. Rushing, R.I.P. He goes, oh, so what do you want to play, Mr. Michael? And I was just like, oh, trumpet. And he goes, well, we got a lot of trumpet players already. And then I was like, oh, well, percussion, because I remember messing with the percussion equipment at the little thing, and he goes, oh, we got so many percussionists. And then I was like, oh, well, saxophone, because you played sax. And I was like, well, I can learn some stuff from Matt. And I was like, oh, saxophone. And he goes, oh, well, we're maxed out at sax. He goes, can you stand up for me real quick? And I was like, yeah. So he goes, put out your arms. And I did. I was like a short little chubby, kid with glasses, braces. I put out my arm.
Victim of the last name and your body type. Isn't that what it always turns out to be if you're a horn player?
Man. Yeah. So, and he goes, oh, you'll grow. We're going to put you on trombone. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I had no idea what it was, but it was, I just knew like playing it was similar to trumpet in a way.
Right.
And even though I didn't know what it was, somehow I was pretty good at it. Like I was like always in like the first or second chair. So it was somewhat easy for me without having to really try hard at that time.
Yeah. Well, the rest is history.
Yeah.
That's too funny. I totally forgot about the mariachi story.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Yeah, but it sucked because it's like mariachi is cool, man. Like once you like kind of deep dive into it, it's pretty awesome. And so like I was really like, now I'm kind of like, dang, I really wish I learned how to do that, because like the music's awesome, and then like you learn like this whole like all these like songs, and I didn't realize how much a lot of these songs have like so much backstory to it and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is sort of like us with Mexican heritage. It's like our jazz music.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, and there's so many standards. And I'm always frustrated that, gosh, I play saxophone. I wish I played a mariachi instrument. Luckily, both my boys play instruments that they could get into mariachi. So I'm hoping one or both of them end up getting to it at some point. But that's kind of interesting that you mentioned your parents, my aunt and uncle, as being a musical influence. But I know that we share common what I call my musical papas, which are our initial musical influences when you're developing as a young musician. And that first one would be our grandparents, Momo and Popo, who I named. And secondly, but not last, would be our mutual band director at Southeastern High School, Mr. John Good.
Yeah. Word up.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least for me, I remember Momo and Popo, like, for being old school Tex-Mex, grannies, grandpas, they had a really eclectic, like, I didn't know that at the time, but now I can, like, appreciate and respect it, like, their taste in music. Like, Momo was, like, jazz and mambo and standards and Frank Sinatra.
Big band stuff.
Yes, all the big band stuff, man. Like, we had that in our background and just didn't really realize it at the time, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And especially around Christmas time, like, growing up with all those, like, jazz standards and stuff. And, man, that really influenced me. And not a lot of people had that, at least coming from our background.
And actually, my grandma Razo, Mary Razo,
Mm-hmm.
When I used to stay, like during the summers, we would split houses when my dad would go to his extra job in the morning, and we would stay at Momo sometimes, and then we'd come over here to Grandma Razo's.
Yeah.
And but yeah, every time we were at Momo and Popo's, big band, like you were saying and stuff like that, jazz, but when we came over here, Grandma Raza didn't listen to a lot of music, but I just remember always watching Lawrence Welk here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, nice.
and so it was like big band. Oh, it was variety,
right,
but
yeah, variety
most
show,
of it was
classic.
like, big band stuff. And
Swinging
and
on
then
the
some
wrong
country,
syllable.
yeah. And I just remember always just be like always into it, like, man, this thing has bubbles. This is cool.
This was pre-Netflix, kids.
Yeah, and but Sabina was also my aunt Sabina. She was also she got me and my sister Elizabeth into Selena.
Oh yeah.
Because there no one really on our side or Razo's side of the family. Actually, and then my parents. I mean, we didn't really listen to a lot of like Tejano music.
Right.
So to me, Tejano music was, like Selena, which, she did, Tejano, but
yeah.
But that's as much as I got when I was a kid.
See, I kind of had a little more exposure because I'm older than you, and I was coming up when Tejano was going out. So like my first little gigs around town were with our first musical influence in the family. My mom and your mom's cousin Mario, so he had a big Tejano band back in the day, and I used to sit in, and they were like, "Hey, here's this kid play saxophone and take a solo in the middle of a Tejano song I didn't know." So, so then I guess going through school, and you did the whole middle school thing, and we all have to trudge through it. But then you got to high school, and I think that's, at least I remember around that time, is when you sort of were getting a little more serious about it. I remember distinctly, like, kind of hacking, like, your Sims and putting, like, jazz music and subliminal stuff in there. Because at that time, man, I was heavy into it. Like,
you were.
I went from, like, straight, like, 90s hip-hop, which is still, I love it to death, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I went from just listening to that to just jazz. And Mr. Good was huge on listening, and that's something I take till today. It's true. You have to learn the vocabulary. So subliminally, I was just like listening to it all the time and forcing it down everybody that I knew. And definitely you. I used to just hack the Sims and put a bunch of songs in there. I hate to tell you, but those songs weren't originally in the Sims.
I know. It's funny that you say that, because like I remember me and Shell would be like, "Man, why does The Sims have like Matt's soundtrack?" Like, they're like, man, like, I don't know. We just thought it because it was always in the music that I was like, oh, right. Man, they have it. It's always the same music Matt listens to. That's weird.
It is weird. Yeah, that was before you could put your own playlist. It's pretty easy to do now.
In high school it was weird because I was in a weird stage. It's not anarchy, but like I just I don't know. There's certain things I was always going against the grain on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Mr. Good, yeah, like he was super awesome teacher, man. Like I really regret not being a more open and understanding student at the time,
Yeah.
just because my maturity level just wasn't there. And but I think back now on it, and I'm just like, damn, dude. Well, I also didn't know I was gonna be playing music. I was just kind of going with the flow in high school, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I think we all had the same experience. I feel like I didn't get serious until the end, and Mr. Good is such a a jazz guy. You know, he really was a resource as an educator. And I kind of feel like we all sort of didn't take advantage of it. But me specifically, like I remember showing you stuff, and it used to drive me nuts because you picked up stuff so quickly. You know, like stuff that I would work on that, you know, like Conrad Johnson would teach me. He was a great jazz educator here in Houston, legendary guy. And it would take me like weeks to learn, and then I'd show you, and it would take you like, I don't know, 30 minutes, and then you'd get bored and you'd go off and play your Game Boy. It used to drive me nuts. I'm like, man, you pick it up so quick. What the heck?
nah, I don't know. I don't even remember that. I just know like I mean, I liked music. I liked listening to it, but I think at that during that time too, I was just kind of like, what am I going to do with this? Like also I didn't see the opportunity outside of just like the stuff they were showing us in school.
Yeah.
Like I was like, see, we didn't. I don't know about you during your time at the high school, but we didn't have a jazz band.
Yep. I remember that. We had one, and then
Okay.
when you started around that time, it was starting to taper off. So I know y'all had your jazz
I think
theory,
it was.
and
I
that
think it
was
was like
about
a
it.
budget thing.
Yeah.
And
See, that's something that I definitely want to touch on in the show, and it kind of good segue into that topic is kind of creativity and arts education, and it's really important. Obviously, people like us think that, but what's kind of your opinion on arts education and how it influenced you? And being in Southeast Houston, which is not the highest income level in
and
Texas,
it's not their main priority.
right? Yeah, but so many great people came from our little school that went on to
Yeah.
different types of arts and music, and I mean, you're one of several that I can think of off the top of my head that actually made a living with it.
Yeah, I mean, for me and my experience, I mean, I had a great time, and I learned a lot, for sure.
Yeah,
But I felt also that thinking on it now, I feel like there could be tweaks to improve certain things. And when I mean improve, I mean getting students' attentions into like what they're doing. Like I know Mr. Good, like for instance, I think it was my freshman year, we did West Side Story as halftime for like football, like
Yeah.
or marching band and stuff. And I mean, I knew what West Side Story was. My parents were already big into musicals, one,
yeah,
and so I kind of knew about it, but I'd never really seen it. So Mr. Good would tell us about the story, him and Mr. Adamczyk, who was an assistant director for me, and then they would made us watch the movie, and it kind of like after watching the movie, it was like, oh, so this is a song. It gave us like it like I don't know how to explain it. Like it just made us focus more on, oh, this is what we're doing, instead of
Yeah.
like, hey, there's this music, let's play it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
There's
put
more
it in
backside to the
perspective, and
Exact. Yeah.
yeah, I
And
agree. More holistic education sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I really credit Mr. Good for doing that. I remember him toting us around to every resource he could find. He'd take us across town to get exposure to other jazz artists and go into these clinics and stuff like that. And I know that wasn't on the school district's dime.
Yeah.
Because there was no school district dime happening.
But I also think there's a way to like, I mean, classical music is cool.
Yeah,
I can say that now.
right.
But when you're like 14, 15-year-old, that's not going to be like, man, I don't want to be listening to this. I want to listen to some like Paul Wall. I want to listen to some rap
Yeah.
or rock, whatever
Uh-huh.
the rock and roll band was at that time,
Right.
But the thing is, some students, they understand, like, the only reason I found out this was because, just of what I've gone through and stuff like that, and experience, knowing that, man, if I would have known I could have done this like a long time ago,
Yeah.
I think I would have taken it more seriously. Or, I mean, I can say that, would it have worked? I don't know. But, there's a lot of kids that, hip hop is like the thing. And I have a few friends that, for instance, Jordan Donald, he's a saxophone player, and that I met, and super great saxophone player.
Yeah.
He plays, he was doing some stuff with Kanye, and I'm just like, what? I was just like, that's awesome. But like, kids don't know, like, yeah, dude, you can, play with like the biggest rapper.
Right.
You just need to, take the boring stuff seriously, which, you just have to have, you just got to take that seriously, work on it. And then once that's solid, you can run with whatever you want to do. And I think that's the hard part, is doing the boring stuff first.
Oh, yeah. That's with any art. I totally agree. But I definitely see the value in non-classically based education when it comes to music. That's a great illustration, but I know that would have probably kept me interested at a lot earlier. I've always thought that as well, that, if you learn other genres, especially jazz is kind of a catch-all, but if you're a really good jazz player, you can pretty much do every genre except classical, and maybe except Latin. That's almost its own thing. But you can sit in with a gospel group or an R&B or hip hop or a country band if you needed to. You can't really do that with classical. You could be the best classical guy, and you stick you in a Tejano band, and it's not going to be not going to be pretty.
Yeah, our trumpet player John Durbin, he showed me. He's always been big into like jazz and stuff, but he's not only does he like straight ahead jazz or whatever, just like traditional just jazz. He's also big into hip hop, and so there's this record. It's a blue. Oh God, it's pretty much like, I want to say, I'll send you the link, but it's like a record, like trip hop almost, like where it's like a blue note record mixed with like hip hop, and like, so pretty much they're samples of like like jazz
like
samples.
modal jazz. Yeah, I've heard projects like that. There was a couple groups in the '90s that come to mind.
Yeah, and I literally found out about this like, when was it? Sometime this year, the beginning of the year or end of last year, and I was like, oh shit, like, and then it made me think like, man, I really wish I took the jazz thing seriously too, But the thing is, it's the maturity level of the person too, which is super hard. But we all learn at different paces. We all learn, and it's just you just got to find what works for you. And I'm kind of glad that I do like appreciate more stuff now, because now I'm like, okay, because I'm in the music business now like full time, so it's like, oh, so it's more inspiration that works with me now than I guess it would have when I was like younger. Yeah,
totally makes sense, and it's all happens at different timing for different people. And I think the creative mind, people that are specifically have that creative nature, I think that's always our thing, like time. Like, I wish I could go back in time and start, like me, being a terrible visual artist, I only got so far. I'm like, man, I wasted so many years trying to be a good artist. Maybe I should have been, working on learning screenwriting or hip-hop even. I still have the love for hip-hop. I'm like, man, if I would have spent as much time getting into hip-hop as I did jazz, maybe I could have really done something with that,
Yeah.
So...
But to answer your question earlier about education and stuff like that, like, I feel like, there could be some things that outside the realm of like classical and jazz, just because like I feel like they're good fundamentals, like like fundamentals to start off with, but you also want to tell them like, what are you listening to nowadays, you know what I mean? Like,
and make it relevant to these kids at that age.
Yeah, because I feel like it would grab them more. And I mean, like I said, I don't know if it'll work or not, but it's also, music nowadays, whatever piques their interest to kind of get them to practice
Yeah.
or to be creative in general. Because, one thing that I always like learned, or everybody always tells me when I'm at a lesson or taking a lesson, is like, yeah, transcribing, try to play that person solo, or and it doesn't have to necessarily be an artist that plays your instrument that you're playing right now. It could just be something on the radio, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And it just can help with your vocabulary. It's just like reading a book, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the more you read it, the better your vocabulary is, and speaking and talking, and the same thing with music. The more you transcribe or try to mimic other artists, it's just gonna put more licks, like musical vocabulary in your back pocket. So when it comes time to be creative, it's just like, okay, well, I heard this, let me try this, on this song or whatever. And
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's a good segue to sort of get into where you're at, or where you've been the last few years, especially in terms of playing with the Sufferers and the bands leading up to that. But we'll actually cover that right after this quick commercial break. And we're back, and you're listening to Profiles of the Creators. That was just a quick sample of a track from the Sufferers, the second album. And that kind of brings us into where you're at now, where you've been the last few years. I can tell you, my family, we've been a fan of the band from the beginning. And it wasn't like obligatory, like we really liked you guys from the very beginning. I definitely knew there was something different. I can't remember who premiered your second album, but I think that first track that they put out was Do Whatever. Was that right? Is that about right?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was Billboard or somebody. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it came out, and I was at work, and I heard the track, and obviously, like I said, we wore out the first CD, and great first CD, but something about that second initial track that came out, it was like a whole nother level. And I was in my car listening to Bluetooth, and I heard you solo, and I've never told you this, but I actually teared up a little bit. and it's just like, I'm an easy crier, so don't get too big-headed. I cried at Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel. But it really, I felt like I was proud, It was like, It was a great solo. It was like, almost like it wasn't you. No offense. But it was a whole nother level. Like, the music was just like popping. Like, it was like, man, this is something that I would listen to like over and over again. And sure enough, like I do. So
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me those Spotify listens, bro. No,
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and it really means a lot knowing that you dig the second album, because the first one, I was proud of it. It's always hard to be proud of like when you put out a record. It's because it's like you always listen to it and you're always like, damn, I could have done this better. We could have done this better. It's like a never ending, like, you can keep working on it as much as you want, but something about the second album, even recording it, because one, I don't like to record. I get like, it's being put in the spotlight, I feel like, and because you're in a studio, and sometimes studios can be, everybody's dissecting you, what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, and I just feel like everybody's listening to your raw sound, and sometimes I'm like, I never really recorded myself at home, or and listened to myself back. And I know it's a really good tool to use when you're practicing and stuff, but I've never done it, and I always hated the way I sounded. So, the second time recording, or going to record the second album, it was probably one of the most comfortable I've had been in a while.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of that, there was more confidence definitely in recording that one. Yeah, there is some things that I know I could have, I felt like I could have done a lot better. But
I think that's every creator though. It doesn't matter
yeah,
what you're doing. I mean, that's why George Lucas did like 20 versions of Star Wars. It's like
yeah,
nobody, you could create a masterpiece and then you're going to find stuff that you don't like and you always
yeah,
want to go back. But that's, I think, what makes a creative and just that continual process of wanting to get
hmm
better. Even when other people feel like, wow, that was great and that was the best thing ever, you're still going to
yeah.
find faults in it.
Yeah, and I think the second album too, we definitely went to places that, people didn't think we would go. Because a lot of people still dig the first album because to them, it sounded like more. We've always got compared, to like Sharon Jones, that throwback vintage soul,
Yeah,
which, it's very like, man, I appreciate y'all putting us in that kind of like category and stuff,
sure.
but we never were really set on a certain sound. We just were just like whatever, we all listen to, the sounds of Houston, just in general,
Yeah,
just we all come from different backgrounds, and backgrounds like, of like of music and just, where we live out in the city. There's different pockets of different, nationalities and stuff. So our sound was like the sound of Houston. And so the second album, we really, I felt like it kind of like we went more into like a R&B ish, soul, like soul, vibe. And I really liked the experimenting we definitely did, and we brought in other musicians other than ourselves that we knew that they could bring a different element to the songs and stuff like that. So that's why I was like, oh, I'm really glad that you really like the second album, more.
yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, I love the first album. It's just like the second one, though. I don't know, too. I think, that, like you said, there is a lot more collaboration, a lot other genres, and I think y'all's band really highlight. I can say y'all because we're from Texas.
Yeah.
The band really highlights the diversity in Houston, because when I was growing up and starting to play around the scene, Houston had a bad reputation. Like there was big musicians' names that didn't come here because we were kind of like, they just didn't really know that like there was so much diversity in different genres and different musicians of all different nationalities. We're pretty mixed group down here, and people kind of get this bad impression. I mean, like me growing up, they're like, well, where did you learn how to play music? What school did you go to? I'm like, I learned in Third Ward. That was my that was my training. I was welcomed with open arms in a predominantly black area town with some of the most legendary jazz musicians of the past 50 years, and just a little Hispanic kid.
Yeah.
There was no question. It was just like, you want to learn this music, and they took you in as one of their own. So there's a lot of that here where I've noticed in the brief touring that I did, that's not, not everybody's as fortunate.
Yeah. And definitely, we still get past a lot. There's some musical acts, big and small, that they still overlook Houston. And but I feel like it's changing though, in a good way. And I think because I think Houston is overlooked musically. And that's there's so many good musicians here, and it's like, and a lot of good bands.
Yeah.
We just so happen to. Sometimes I feel like we were just lucky. We're in the right spot at the right time, and that's how we got to where we are, and which but yeah, there's just so much, but Houston's so big, and a lot of people, you have to dig deep for that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? You have to go out if you want to find the good music. You have to go out and look for these places, and just look for it, man, because it's there. It's just, if it's the people that want to go and find it, they'll find it.
Yeah. I think that's something about the creative process, turning it into practice versus into actually doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I can't discount with you guys, is that, I saw the entire band put in the work and the time, marketing, grinding out there, networking. Individually, you guys, from your lead singer, Cam Franklin, and all the individual members that make up the Suffers, it seems like you're all great musicians on your own, and y'all can do your own thing, but collectively, you guys all pretty much do the work to get to that next level and to get these projects done. So what would you say that collaboration is like, and how is that important to the creative process?
Well, our creative process is, from what I hear, is a little different from, other bands. I mean, I could be wrong, but we usually, when we first started the first album, a lot of it was just jamming out.
Yeah.
Someone's like, "Hey, I got this chord change that I have."
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. And then they'll start playing it, and then someone will start, just the drummer will come in and start playing a beat over it, and then we would play that song to death. And then we're like, all right. And after playing it for I don't know how many times and drinking a few beers, and we're like, all right, we're going home. That's it. And we would record it on something and then let it marinate.
Yeah. And
then come back, shed it out again. And that was with, a lot of our songs was just, just shedding it out. There was no, and also at the time when we were making these songs, there wasn't a rush for anything, because we weren't touring yet. We still had full-time jobs and stuff. So the process was real chill. Yeah. And, no urgency. And, and everybody would have a little say in, everybody would come up with an idea. Mm-hmm. on their instrument, and we would collectively put all of our ideas together. If something didn't work out, someone would say something. We were pretty good about hey man, that guitar riff is really tight, but this other one sounds way better. We let's do something else. And everybody's pretty cool about, if their idea gets shut down, it doesn't mean it sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing that you said, because usually you think creatives, they get together and sometimes the ego get in the way. But I think if you're willing to put that down and really come up with this collaborative process, like you guys obviously figured it out, man, you can create some really great art. It sort of sounds like the Pixar process, where they get into this big room and they just sort of have it out, and kind of, sometimes it also means downing your colleague or your peer and tell them, hey, that's not great, even though you're in love with it. But at the end, you get this great, awesome product.
Yeah, and the thing is too, is we have a thing where we started where it's like a vault. Yeah. So of ideas. So your idea doesn't make it, but it's still recorded somewhere. Oh. We put it in the vault because it could work on another song that we work on.
Oh, that's cool.
And so you can always go back to it and stuff like that. But yeah, and that's the other thing. Yeah, no one really has an ego. Everybody's pretty level-headed. And as far as the creative process, on the other stuff, don't get me started. No, it's fine.
Oh, it comes out here. No, just yeah.
No, everybody's pretty good and level-headed and understanding about what the goal is in the song is to make it the best possible song it can be.
Yeah.
If your idea doesn't work, you gotta understand. Look, yeah, that's a good idea, but to get to the next level where we want it, we're going this route, and you have to understand. Okay, yeah, I understand. We want the best thing there is for the song and stuff like that. And but that's pretty much how the creative process goes. Everybody kind of throws their idea, see if it sticks on the wall, and if it works, it works out. And sometimes you'll go into the studio and it doesn't work, because then you'll have a producer there. That we started working with producers, and they'll have some input on it as well. And so sometimes what you think worked at rehearsal, they're like, well, try this. And you're like, damn it, So you kind of have to be on your toes knowing that things are going to change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or get cut even when recording and stuff like that. But I'll always try to go with some kind of skeleton. We always try to go with some kind of skeleton or structure. And then once it's recorded, we know that's why we started doing demos and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So after all the demos, everything getting picked apart, when we go to the studio to actually record it, we've already practiced it a few times to where it's super solid, so we can get in there, knock it out, and then move on to the next thing.
Nice. I think as an individual, as a musician, what part of the creative process do you enjoy the most? Like, do you prefer performing? Do you prefer kind of setting up these sessions when you're kind of planning out an album? Is it the touring? I mean, which is your favorite part of the process, and maybe what's the least?
well, oh man, recording I would say is the least favorite.
Yeah. Just
because to me it's pressure.
Yep.
That's how I see it. But who was it? I was talking to somebody, Mr. Ryan Gabbert, trombonist in Houston. And I was saying, he goes, "Oh, you don't like recording?" I was like, "Nah, man, I just feel like I'm under the microscope." He's like, "But that's the time to create and with your friends and stuff." And I was like, "Man, yeah. I mean, it's true, but it's always in my head knowing that whatever I put on this record, that's it forever."
Yeah, that'll be way past us. Yeah, I kind of like that idea. That's appealing. The part that bothers me, though, kind of going back to your point, is the other end of it is just that there is a lot of pressure, and there's people that are engineering and producing, and it feels like their time is precious. And me coming from the old school before everything went digital, man, those early recording sessions, man, there was some pressure. I mean, you're getting paid a set rate, and it's usually a lot better than what you're getting paid for a little gig. And you better perform because, hey, that time is so precious to a lot of people, and it's like even more pressure on you.
And that's why coming back is like, fundamentals is, you need to know your fundamentals, because if you're not articulating right, you're not on with the tempo, you're just screwing it up for everybody. And you're gonna do it again and again and again and again. And
then you got that click track in the back, just click, click, click.
Oh, man, dude, I hate it.
Isn't that torture?
Yeah, and it's like that part in La Bamba. Well, and like he does it like 20 million times.
Yeah,
I don't go to it. But anyway, a recording is my least favorite.
Yeah.
We've actually started recording our third album, and honestly, this has probably been my favorite and most comfortable I've ever been so far. It just seems like every recording process to me is just getting better and better. I think it's just I'm getting used to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good.
But and I'm trying not to think in that mindset of being under the microscope and stuff, and seeing it more as creating. But yeah, recording is my least favorite. The second favorite part, I think, is artwork. I've always been a visual person.
Yep.
I've always kind of been into art, like low key. I never really talk about it, but I always have.
No, you definitely. I talked about this earlier before I interviewed you, of my own artistic aspirations and how I was a terrible visual artist. But being surrounded by artists, you're definitely one of them. It's like a lot of our family has that natural ability, but it passed right over me. But yeah, you definitely have it. And even your marketing and stuff that you've done with the Sufferers, I can see your art. I know when it's your stuff or your contribution.
And I used to do a lot of, and I think it came from like just a lot of DIY stuff, a lot of because I used to, when I was in Los Carnales, I used to do a lot of our posters and stuff on Photoshop, and it was so easy because punk rock is just slapping shit together.
Yeah.
And so like it was easy to put together, and then and I just like that aesthetic look to it, and like the just slap together DIY, and then but then to get better at visual art, I kind of did a lot of research and I started getting into like some other stuff, and I was like, oh shit, you can do this, you can do that. And even though I stopped doing a lot of Suffers posters, it was not until recent I started getting back into like visual art again, just because of being quarantined at home and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then kind of just messing around with Photoshop again, or having that time to, and kind of getting how do you say, like back into it. I don't know, something like triggered me in getting it again. But I like the artwork process because nowadays, well, not nowadays, but vinyl's always been a thing. It just seems to have a resurgence lately.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing like old school records that when you open the record, the artwork is like, you have a bigger, landscape, for like pictures of visual art on the album.
Right.
And now that records are, have a resurgence again.
Yes.
Usually the bands nowadays, they have art for CDs, if you still buy CDs.
Right.
And then you have the main artwork, which is going to be your record, if someone has a record player or not.
Yeah, that's one thing. I know you're a big record LP aficionado, and I've gotten into it because of you, and also I inherited some of Momo and Popo's records, and then that's really got me started. And now it's kind of a obsession. So,
yeah.
But there is something about holding that thing in your hand and seeing the art that goes along with it, and just hearing that crackling.
Yeah, man. And then nowadays, I mean, with technology, I mean, the artwork is more, you can do so much now, manipulate so much stuff and it's just, visually it's so pleasing. And now they have colored records, and so, yeah, the creativity behind going into the artwork is fun. We all usually have a say in it. There's not usually one person or anything that kind of that does it. And then my most favorite part, it's my most favorite and kind of least favorite, is touring. Touring's fun. I mean, it has its ups and downs. I'm a big coffee guy, so and record guy. So every time we go, every city we go to after sound check, the first thing we do, me, John, and Choppy, we go to the local coffee shop.
Yeah.
Find the best coffee, grab a cup, go, and then go to the record shop around there, and then we go back, play the show, and whatnot. But yeah, meeting all these people is really cool. I've always been a shy person. I've always been shy, and now that I run like the merch store and stuff like that, and like, yeah, you kind of have to talk to people, but it's definitely brought me out of my shell.
Yeah.
And learn how to, interact with people and stuff like that. And so it's been fun, and seeing the country more than I have when I had, a full-time job. Me and my wife Jocelyn, we always talk about going to go do this and that, take a vacation, but we never get to.
Yeah.
And then, but then when I started touring, I think we've both been to so many places that we've been wanting to go to for the longest. And even though it's not as long as we want it to be, we make the most of it, or try to make the most of it. And on top of that, I get to, figure out the spots that are the coolest. So if she doesn't get to try it when I'm on tour, when we have time to take off, we'll go back.
Yeah, I think that gives you a great opportunity to sort of sample this place before you go back for a longer, lengthier stay.
Yeah, definitely. And for my parents too, especially now that my dad's retired and they like to go on vacation. Not like we can go anywhere right now, but
yeah, I think of a good friend of mine that's a percussionist from Manhattan, and he's got a full-time gig. He runs a taxi company out there, but during the summers he's a full-time musician, and he goes tours all of Europe. And gets paid to basically tour Europe for, the summer. And also his tour schedule, I believe, is a little more relaxing. So he has a lot more downtime. But I think that's a pretty cool prospect to be able to see different places and and then still come back and do what he has to do. But
Yeah, but I mean, it's fun, and like I said, like meeting the people is really cool. You know, I've heard so many stories about how like, you know, like for example, like somebody had like a bad day, they almost didn't go to the show, and then all of a sudden they went and it turned their day around, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, like or you know, like someone was depressed, you know, they lost a family member, and you know, and they felt depressed for a while, and then they went to our show and it changed like their life. And it's just, I just never thought our music would have like that kind of impact on people and in general. I mean, we just wanted them to have fun, you know, and there was no setting out to do that. And so yeah, it's really been cool to hear everybody's stories and like how our music has kind of like changed some things in their lives for the better and stuff like that. But it's also, touring has also been my least favorite because, you know, you're away from home,
yeah,
you know, for, you know, a while. I'm married and, you know, we don't have any kids, but, you know, there's, you know, we always talk about, oh, let's have kids, but I'm like, nah, I want to be around, you know, like I don't want to be gone half the time. And even though, you know, we have a few band members that have kids and they're doing it and it's tough, and I see how tough it is. They make it look easy sometimes,
Yeah.
but then I hear, you know, it is tough for them as well. And but and then not only that, you know, I miss a lot of, you know, parties, birthday parties. I miss some funerals that I've really, you know, really beat myself up over, and for not being able to come home, or you know, just because, you know, I cast like I can't leave tour, you know, even though they're not immediate family. If it was an immediate family, definitely, but I mean, I would consider some of these people immediate family, but
right.
you know, I just wasn't able to, and it would, yeah, there's like stuff like that would just like eat me up that I wasn't able to come.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so it's just missing out on things like that. Like I feel like at one point I felt disconnected a lot, and I was just like, damn man, like this sucks. But this quarantine has kind of like, or this pandemic kind of thing is kind of like, even though I still can't see a lot of family members.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still like talking on the phone more than I had been when I was on tour. And, you know, your mom came by to drop off, you know, groceries. I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
You know, I was just like, oh man, I wish I could give you a hug right now, but I can't.
Virtual hug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's good to be home, but it's also cool to see the, you know, the country and, you know, the world, and be able to, you know, play music with some of your good friends and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think that is a unique thing that's unique to your band. You know, all art, all creative output has some kind of desired effect, but I feel like the music of the Sufferers has been more of a positive, uplifting sort of thing, you know? Mm-hmm. And it does attract fans from all walks of life, all kind of ideologies, all different ages, which is really unique. That's not a common thing that I see a lot of places these days, especially in the music world.
Yeah. There's some, actually, it's funny that you say that, because there's some times like where we've gone to shows and like it's cool to see when the kids and the parents go to the same concert together. Yeah. And I was just like, what? Like, I mean, I went, one of my first concerts ever was going to like Santana with my parents, but I was like a kid, you know, like.
Yeah,
like,
it's true. There's not a lot of bands like that. And now that you mention it, like just in my family, my wife and my daughter, like they can listen to, you know, the music all day long, and they'll both enjoy it. And your band is probably one of the few that I could say that they have the same amount of enjoyment from the music. That's
awesome.
Yeah. So that is cool. That's really, I think that's special and that's unique. So that's got to be worth some of the pain and and long distanceness,
suffering,
and the suffering. There you go. You know, I have some of my common Google searches set up on my news. So if a news article comes out about you guys, it pops up. But instead of the sufferers, sometimes it'll be like suffers of celiac disease. And a news article comes up about that. I'm like, Google, you're so wrong. That's not what I'm talking about. And yes, I do suffer from gluten intolerance, but that's not what I'm trying to look up.
That's funny.
Well, I guess that's a good segue to get into what you're doing outside of the band, especially now that, you know, we're sort of in semi-work mode. But, you know, you started this podcast. And it's a video podcast and it's live. Those are two things that are super hard.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, man. For real.
So tell us about, okay, I'll make sure I get this right. Bone Town, a podcast about nothing except trombones.
But trombones.
Oh, sorry. I added a word.
Nah, so the concept about behind the podcast was I had thought about it on tour, while we're on tour.
Yeah.
Because when you're on tour, you travel a lot. You're always in the van. We're always listening to music. And every now and then, I'm like, I don't want to hear any music. I want to blow my brains out if I hear any song.
That's hard for maybe some of our listeners to understand. As a musician, a lot of times you don't want to hear. I mean, I don't say a lot, but enough times. I think especially if you're doing it full time. I know me after a gig, I don't want to hear any music.
Yeah, there's times after gigs where I'm on the, like, not on tour, but like if I've done like a local gig,
right,
and I'm driving home, it's in silence.
Yeah.
And it's the best. Mm-hmm. And like I don't hear anything, and I'm just like, I can't wait to get home, make something to eat, and go to sleep.
Yeah.
But so I started listening to a lot of podcasts on tour. Mm-hmm. Our then bassist Adam Castaneda really got me into a bunch of cool podcasts, called some about serial killers and
those are the best.
And like UFOs and stuff like that. And let's see what else. And some comedy podcasts. And I just got into a rabbit hole of them, and I thought it was the coolest. I know podcasts had been around for a very long time, but I just never really listened to them. And but it wasn't until recently that I started getting into them, like hardcore. And so on tour, I was going through this like rough patch about playing, and I was just like, damn, I need to get some lessons in, man, and some private lessons. I was like, I don't know what to do to fix this, and so I hit up Henry Dara for a private lesson, and after doing some lessons with him, I kept wanting to ask him all these questions, so I kept writing them down, and I was like, damn, it sounds like I'm trying to do an interview here, or like, you know.
Yeah.
And I was just like, hey, I that'd be cool. Like every time I come home from tour, set up a private lesson with like a different trombonist in Houston.
Yeah. And
then interview him, and then put it up as a podcast. I was like, that'd be cool. And because first of all, trombone isn't like the most, you know, cool thing to like, you know, people in general. Everybody's all like, oh, trumpet guy, yeah, saxophone guy, yeah. Right. Guitar player, yeah, you know.
Yeah, but not the trombone. That doesn't get the love. You know what though? It's really weird. Man?
Are you playing like a big trumpet or something? And I'm like,
you may say that, but I see like a ton of trombones. I don't know if it's like the awareness is like exponentially. I feel like since you kind of blew up, all of a sudden I see trombones everywhere. Like when I drop the kids off to school, my oldest son plays drums, the little one plays upright bass and electric bass as well. But everywhere it's trombones. Like I don't see any saxes. I see like one trumpet, one clarinet. But I see like 30 trombones. I'm like, is that a new thing? Is there like a Mexican banda program at these schools?
Dude, I don't know. But if there is, I want part of that.
You want in?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, but I mean, trombone wasn't always like the most thing to be put up, you know?
Right.
And or to be on the pedestal. And so so I was just like, yeah, let's show some like trombonists some love. I was like, because there's like, you know, everybody's all like, man, you're really good. And I was like, nah, dude, I suck, man. There's like way cooler dudes than me, you know. And so I was just like, well, let me show these people that don't know about these other like awesome trombonists. So it was a way to also highlight local. At first, it was just going to be local Houston trombonists.
Yeah.
But then I met a lot of like really badass trombonists while I'm touring. So I was just like, well, how about if once I get that like down, I can bring a rig with me on the road where I'm able to interview people, especially with the opening bands and the people that I've met on the road. And I was just like, oh shit. And I ran it by through a couple of friends, trombone friends,
Hmm.
and they're all like, dude, that is really badass. That'd be so cool. I'd totally listen to that. And I was like, oh, for real? Like, at first
Yeah.
I was just like, it was just an idea. And then when people seemed intrigued about it, I was like, well, maybe I can do it. And then the pandemic hit, and and I was just like, man, like a lot of our shows got canceled,
Yep.
tour got canceled, and I literally woke up one day and was just like, dude, I'm gonna do the podcast.
Nice.
And I like literally that day I cleaned out one of our rooms in the back, and so I could have like an aesthetic looking wall in the back, and I hit up Henry Dare. I was like, hey man, because I was like, I know he ain't doing anything. We're all home. We're all home.
Dr. Henry
And
Darrow, the
and so I was
professor,
like,
jazz guy. Yeah. Yeah. Shout
yeah.
out
And I
to.
was like, dude, I'm doing this podcast. I
Hmm.
literally woke up and I decided I'm gonna do it tomorrow.
Nice.
And he's like, yeah, I'm down, man. Just let me know. And I was like, cool. So we did it, and of course there was like a lot of hiccups because I have never done a podcast before,
Yeah.
never produced one, and didn't have all the right equipment for sure, but
Hmm.
was able to do it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, well, not a lot, but there was some like buzz to it. So I was like, cool. And so, yeah, and then so far I've been interviewing. I have 6 episodes in, and yeah, they're all live, and it's definitely hard doing it live. I'm starting to do some editing on the side, like getting that video that was live, and then
Yes.
editing an intro at the beginning, as well as like sponsors and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Well, I mean, for being so early in it, I'm really impressed with how it's kind of developed along. And I suspect there's more of a trombone audience out there than you probably think.
Yeah. Well, and so the thing is too is like kind of thinking about it. I was just like, well, it's not just for trombonists. It's mostly about trombonists,
Yeah.
but it's also I see it as entertainment for musicians, especially that are out of work right now.
Yeah,
Or
I've found stuff in there that I'm like, wow, it's applicable to all musicians, and it's sort of universal stuff, and not even just musicians. I think artists in general.
yeah, and then I was hoping for an educational purpose for younger musicians that were interested in the music business in general. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
That's the hard
And
part. There's so many great musicians, but and creatives in general. The business
mhm,
side is going to be sort of a detailed part of this podcast because it is important. You be the
yeah,
best
and
artist in the world, but you don't have any business acumen behind it, or someone that knows that, and you're just never gonna, get that
yeah,
recognition.
yeah, and like one thing, it's funny because like you're used to just creating music, which is fun, and we still are trying to do it remotely, which is hard.
Yeah,
But you have to find other sources of creativity to keep the train rolling. And for the band, we're considered a small business,
hmm,
and so we can't just stop. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So we had to find different outlets of creativity to keep going and whatnot. And so what we did is on our Instagram, every day each band member has to take over the Instagram.
oh,
So
okay,
sometimes it's a Q&A with the bass player, drummer, John, trumpet player, and everybody. And so I started doing the Bone Town podcast live on Instagram, and I found a way to do it finally on Facebook as well, to do
yeah,
it simultaneously,
oh, nice,
which was super hard. But that's what kind of you have to dig in and find something that creative wise that's going to keep everybody interested. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's not just for, like I said, it's not just for trombonists, but it's definitely for just people that love music and they don't see what these musicians go through, or they don't know some of these musicians exist in the city.
Yeah.
And they have all these cool bands, and so I'm bringing it to them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's I think you guys have pivoted to this whole quarantine pretty well. I think a lot of us sort of just went dormant otherwise. So it's cool that you are able to do that. And I see
it also keeps me sane.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's great that people were pursuing creative interest during this time, and kind of leads me sort of to the last big question. So you've got the podcast, and at some point, you're going to be up and running again, but what's next? What is your creative venture? What are your creative aspirations leading to next for you?
Oh man. Well, the band is releasing a new single at sometime at the end of July or June, excuse me, the end of June. We've been working on an album already, the third album. We don't have a name yet, but we are definitely in the process of recording some more songs that we're hoping to go back to the studio sometime July to finish up, and then whenever this thing is done, hopefully go back on. I mean, I don't see ourselves being on the road till like sometime next year.
Yeah,
which is scary and sucks.
Yeah.
but it's I'm down to keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
And whatnot, and so including ourselves. But I'll still keep doing the podcast and trying to figure out new ways to make it keep it going and stuff like that. But I would definitely bring, now that I have a setup, a laptop now, a microphone, I'll definitely take it on the road with me once we start getting into touring mode again.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I started woodworking, or
Wow.
I'm in the process of doing some woodworking.
Wow, that's impressive.
I know.
I did not see that.
I barely
coming.
got a drill the other day.
A little Ron Swanson going on there.
I know. Yeah. Too bad I can't grow a mustache.
You can borrow mine.
Yeah, thank you. No, but just keep doing the podcast, keep playing as much as I can, and hopefully still keep creating music with the band. And if we can't get this album out by the end of this year, I mean, hopefully we'll have some more material to already make a fourth album. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody, now that we've been home, I think everybody's been figuring out ways to record at home with what we have. It might not be like the best setup, but I mean, nowadays you can record on anything, your phone, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And still figure out ways to do it, and it still sound decent enough to release and stuff like that. So, who knows, man? I just really hope that it doesn't come to waiting till next year. But yeah, we actually had a meeting today, listening to some more demos that we're working on, and it sounds super awesome, and these are just demos, and so I really can't wait to get in the studio again and with the producer to kind of help us, guide us and whatnot, see what we can do with these new tracks.
Well, that's awesome, and we're definitely looking forward to what comes next. And I know we can look up the band on thesuffers.com.
Yeah.
And
we're also, you can look for the band The Suffers on any social media platform, just The Suffers, and yeah, we're
MySpace.
There. Yeah, MySpace too.
What about your podcast? Where can we find that?
Oh, my podcast is just Bonetown Pod on Instagram. Let's see, I only have, and then Facebook is just Bonetown Podcast, I believe. And we're on YouTube at just Bonetown, all caps. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Be careful when you search for Bonetown, just FYI.
Yeah, just don't type too fast.
All right, well, with that is the... I thank you for being my first guest, my little bro, Michael Razo from The Suffers. I'd like to thank you for listening in. You can check us out at facebook.com, Profiles of the Creators, and subscribe to our podcasts anywhere podcasts are found. The theme song, From Negative to Positive, was composed and performed by Tony Nieves Jr. The show is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Mateo Macarzal, for Mackerel Studios. Stay tuned for the next show as we bring you in-depth interviews of other creatives on Profiles of the Creators.
A Mackerel Studios